A homeless black boy saved a dying woman unaware. She's a billionaire. What she did next shocked every. Among the crowd, a young boy moved quietly, almost like a shadow. He wore tattered clothes that barely kept him warm, and his shoes had holes in them, but his eyes were bright and full of life. Even though he was only 12, life had already taught him lessons most adults never had to face. He was homeless. He had no home to go to at night, no parents to hug him, and no one to worry about him. But despite all that, he carried something rare inside him, a heart full of kindness and courage. He had learned to survive on the streets. Every day was a struggle to find food, water, and a safe place to sleep. He knew where to find leftover bread from bakeries, and he knew which shopkeepers would give him small bits of food if he asked politely. He slept under bridges or in abandoned corners where no one could bother him. Life was hard, but he had learned to be strong, careful, and watchful. One chilly afternoon, as the boy was walking along a busy street, he noticed a commotion ahead. A small crowd had gathered near a fountain, and people were pointing and murmuring. Curiosity tugged at him, and he edged closer. That's when he saw her, a woman who had collapsed. She was lying on the ground, struggling to breathe. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she tried to push herself up. People were staring, whispering to each other, but no one stepped forward to help. The boy's heart raced. He knew he couldn't just stand there. Without thinking, he ran toward her, weaving through the crowd. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you hear me?" he asked, kneeling beside her. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and she tried to speak, but her voice was weak. "Help me," she managed to whisper. The boy looked around, but the crowd only seemed more frozen, unsure of what to do. Some were reaching for their phones to call an ambulance, while others just kept staring. But he didn't have time to wait. He remembered what he had seen people do in movies and on television. He had watched enough to know a little could make a big difference. He carefully tilted her head back and checked if she was breathing. She was, but it was shallow and uneven. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, speaking softly to keep her calm. "Don't worry, ma'am, I'm here." "You're going to be okay," he said, though he wasn't sure himself. Then he spotted a man in a suit with a phone. "Hey, call an ambulance, hurry," he shouted. The man nodded, dialing quickly. The boy stayed by her side, keeping her warm by using his jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders like a blanket. "You're going to be fine, just breathe slowly," he whispered, though his own hands were trembling. Minutes felt like hours. The woman's breathing was still weak, and her lips were turning pale. People in the crowd were whispering nervously, glancing at each other. The boy tried to focus on her face, talking to her, distracting her from the fear. "You're strong. You can do this. Help is on the way." His words seemed small in the chaos, but he refused to leave her side. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The boy felt a flicker of relief. The ambulance arrived, and paramedics jumped out, rushing to the woman. They thanked the boy for staying with her and handed her over to their care. The boy stepped back, watching as she was lifted onto the stretcher, her weak eyes looking at him briefly. In that look, he felt a connection, something that went beyond words. The crowd slowly dispersed, and the boy stayed behind for a moment, catching his breath. He felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, pride, and a little hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt like what he did really mattered. After the ambulance drove away, the boy continued his walk through the city streets. He moved past the tall buildings and bright shops, past people who were too busy to notice him, as he often did. He thought about the woman he had helped. He wondered if she would be okay. He wondered if anyone would ever know that it was a homeless boy who had saved her life. But even as he thought about it, he felt no regret. Helping her had been the right thing to do, and that was enough for him. As the sun began to set, the city changed. The streets grew darker and the temperature dropped. The boy searched for a place to sleep. He found a quiet corner behind an old bookstore where the shadows kept him hidden. He wrapped himself in his thin blanket and tried to sleep, but his mind kept wandering back to the woman. He thought about how fragile life could be and how quickly everything could change. Despite his hardships, the boy had learned something important on the streets. Courage was not about being strong or having power. It was about choosing to do the right thing, even when no one was watching, and today he had proven that to himself. As night fell and the city lights flickered on, the boy drifted into a restless sleep. Somewhere in the hospital, the woman he had saved was fighting for her life. The boy didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness would soon change both their lives forever. Little did he know, the woman was not just any stranger. She was a powerful, wealthy woman who had lived a life of influence and luxury. But in that moment, she was just a human being, vulnerable and scared, and the boy's bravery had given her a second chance. And that second chance would set off a chain of events that neither of them could have imagined. A story of hope, transformation, and the unexpected ways that kindness can change the world. The boy's journey on the streets was far from over, but for the first time he felt a spark of hope. A spark that told him that even in a harsh world, courage, empathy, and kindness could make a difference. And sometimes that difference could be life itself. After the ambulance had driven away, life seemed to go back to its normal rhythm, at least for most people in the city. But for the boy, the events of that afternoon lingered in his mind like a shadow he couldn't shake. He returned to his usual routine, wandering the streets, finding bits of food and searching for a safe place to sleep. Yet something inside him felt different. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman he had helped. Her eyes, so full of fear and weakness, had stared at him with a kind of silent gratitude. Even though he was homeless and struggling every day, he felt a sense of pride. He had done something important. He had saved a life. Meanwhile, in the hospital, the woman slowly regained her strength. She was unconscious for a while, but the doctors and nurses noticed a remarkable improvement in her condition. When she finally opened her eyes and saw the familiar white walls of the hospital room, she felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. The woman had lived a life of privilege, surrounded by wealth and influence. She had never experienced danger or helplessness in the same way ordinary people did. And now, she realized that in one fleeting moment, her life had depended entirely on the courage of a stranger, a young boy who had nothing to gain from helping her. When she was stable enough to speak with the doctors, she asked again and again about the boy who had helped her. They explained that he was a homeless child, living on the streets and surviving day by day. The woman could hardly believe it. She had imagined someone older, stronger, or trained in first aid, not a child in tattered clothes who looked no older than 12. The thought of him rushing to her side, speaking to her calmly, and saving her life amazed her. She could not stop thinking about him. She wanted to meet him. Back on the streets, the boy continued his usual routine. He knew the city like the back of his hand, every corner and alley, but that night sleep came slowly. He could still feel the warmth of the woman's hand as he had tried to support her, the tremble in her voice as she whispered for help, and the look in her eyes before the ambulance arrived. He had never experienced gratitude in the way he saw it reflected in her gaze. It was powerful, almost like a gift. The next morning, the boy awoke to the sounds of the city, cars honking, people chattering, and the distant wail of sirens. He wandered through the streets, trying to find something to eat. As he passed a busy cafe, he noticed a small envelope lying on the ground near the trash bin. Curious, he picked it up. Inside was a neatly written note and a small amount of money. The note simply read, "Thank you for your bravery. Please meet me at the hospital at 2 p.m." A friend, the boy's heart raced. He had never been called a friend by anyone, not in the way the note implied. Questions ran through his mind. Who had left it? Why did they want to meet him? But curiosity won over caution, and he decided to go. He carefully folded the note, stuffed it into his pocket, and made his way to the hospital, navigating the crowded streets with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. When he arrived at the hospital, he was led to a private room. There, sitting in a chair near the bed, was the woman he had saved. She smiled at him warmly, and in that instant, the boy realized that she had not forgotten him. She looked different in the bright hospital lights, still fragile, but her presence was commanding. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm so grateful for what you did. You saved my life, and I want you to know how much that means." The boy shifted nervously, unsure how to respond. He had never received praise before, especially not from someone so important. I just did what anyone should do," he mumbled, shrugging slightly. She shook her head. "No, not anyone would have done that. You acted with courage when most people were just watching. That matters more than you can imagine." As they talked, the woman decided to tell the boy who she really was. She explained that she was a billionaire, someone with wealth and influence far beyond what he had ever seen. She told him that she owned companies, supported charities, and had the ability to change lives. Yet in that moment, she was just a human being, vulnerable and scared, and it was his bravery that had made the difference. The boy was stunned. He had never seen so much wealth or power up close, but surprisingly, he didn't feel intimidated. He felt a strange sense of connection, as if they had shared a moment that transcended social status or money. For the first time in his life, he realized that the world was bigger than the streets, bigger than his struggles, and that there were people who could truly make a difference. The woman asked him about his life, listening carefully as he explained how he survived, where he slept, and what he dreamed about. He spoke honestly without shame because he knew she wouldn't judge him. She nodded thoughtfully, absorbing every word. "You've faced so much, and yet you have a kind heart and courage," she said. "That's something most people with money and comfort never have. I want to help you, but not just with money. I want to help you build a life, one where you can chase your dreams and be safe." The boy felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. Help from someone like her seemed impossible. He had lived in a world where survival was the only goal. Dreams felt distant and almost unreachable. But now, sitting in a hospital room with the woman who had been his patient, he realized that change was possible. Over the next few weeks, the woman began arranging ways to support him. She made sure he had proper clothing, access to food, and a safe place to stay. She connected him with teachers and mentors who could guide him in learning and personal growth. Slowly, the boy began to see a life he had never imagined, a life where he could go to school without fear, where he could dream about his future, and where kindness and courage were recognized. The boy's days started to change. He learned to read more effectively, studied math and science, and discovered books and stories that opened his mind. The city that had once seemed overwhelming and dangerous now felt full of possibilities. He also learned from the woman how to think about life beyond survival, about helping others, making decisions, and understanding the power of compassion. Despite these changes, he never forgot his past. He remembered the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear. Those experiences had shaped him, teaching him resilience, empathy, and determination. And now, with guidance and support, he could turn those lessons into something meaningful. The woman, for her part, felt inspired by the boy as well. She had spent her life surrounded by wealth and influence, but she realized that true courage and character were often found in unexpected places. The boy's bravery reminded her why she had started her charitable work in the first place. She began involving him in small projects, showing him how helping others could create ripples of positive change. As months passed, the boy and the woman developed a deep bond. They were no longer just savior and saved. They became friends, mentors, and supporters of each other. The boy learned not just about books and knowledge, but also about trust, compassion, and the importance of believing in oneself. The woman, in turn, learned humility, gratitude, and the power of a single courageous act to transform lives. One day, while walking through a park together, the boy asked her a question that had been on his mind for a long time. "Why me? Out of everyone, why did you want to help me?" She smiled, kneeling slightly to meet his eyes. "Because you showed something rare. You showed courage and kindness without expecting anything in return, and that is priceless. Anyone can give money, but not everyone can act with a true heart. You reminded me that the world needs people like you." The boy felt a warmth inside him, one he had never felt before. It was not just gratitude, but a sense of belonging, a feeling that he mattered, that his life could have meaning beyond survival. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he could achieve more than just food and shelter. As the boy continued to grow, he realized that the world was full of opportunities, but they were often hidden behind fear, doubt, or circumstance. With the woman's support, he began to navigate these opportunities with courage, just as he had faced the moment on the street when he saved her life. And though the city around them continued to rush by, filled with people too busy to notice each other, the boy and the woman had found a connection that would last a lifetime. It was a connection built on trust, gratitude, courage, and the understanding that even the smallest act of kindness could change the course of two lives forever. Little did the boy know this was just the beginning. The bond they had formed, the lessons they were learning from each other, and the courage that had started it all would soon lead to opportunities and challenges that neither of them could have imagined. But for now, in the quiet moments of learning, friendship, and shared hope, the boy began to believe in a life beyond the streets, a life full of possibility, purpose, and the power to make a difference. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the boy's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. The streets that had once been his world, full of danger and struggle, now felt distant, almost like a memory from another life. He still remembered every corner, every alley, every cold night he had spent alone. But now, with the woman's guidance and support, he was learning to step into a world of opportunity, knowledge, and hope. Every morning, he woke up in a small, safe apartment arranged by the woman. It was a place he could finally call his own, even if just a little. For the first time, he had a bed that was warm, sheets that were clean, and a sense of safety he had never known. The walls were plain, but to him, they felt like the walls of a palace. It was a place where he could dream without fear. School was a new and strange experience for him. He had always been curious and intelligent, but he had never had the chance to learn properly. Now, with tutors arranged by the woman, he studied diligently. Reading, writing, math, science, everything was new, and he absorbed it all with a hunger he had never known before. Some days were frustrating. Sometimes he struggled with concepts that other children took for granted, but he refused to give up. He remembered the woman's words, "Courage and kindness are important, but so is persistence. Keep going, even when it's hard." The woman also introduced him to other children and teenagers who were learning through her charitable programs. They came from different backgrounds, some wealthy, some struggling, but they all shared a common goal: to learn and grow. At first, the boy felt out of place. He had never been around people who had so much and yet wanted to learn, but slowly he began to make friends. They admired his courage, his honesty, and the way he never complained about his past or his struggles. Beyond school, the woman involved him in small projects to help others. She wanted him to see that life was not just about receiving help, but also about giving it. Together, they visited shelters, orphanages, and community centers. The boy began to understand that the kindness he had shown to the woman was the same kind of kindness that could transform other lives. He helped feed children, distribute clothing, and share stories that encouraged hope. One afternoon, as they walked through a community center filled with children, the boy paused to watch a small girl struggling with her schoolwork. He remembered how he had once felt lost and alone, trying to survive without guidance. Kneeling beside her, he patiently explained the problem, step by step. Her face lit up with understanding, and for the first time he realized something profound. The same courage and patience that had saved a life could also inspire and guide others. The woman noticed this change in him and smiled. She knew that helping him was not just changing his life, it was creating a ripple effect that could touch many others. She also began to trust him with more responsibility. He started accompanying her to meetings where she planned charitable projects and initiatives. At first, it was overwhelming. The world of finance, planning, and philanthropy was complicated, filled with unfamiliar words and concepts. But the boy had learned to be brave in the face of the unknown. He asked questions, listened carefully, and learned quickly. Through this process, he discovered a talent for problem solving. He could see solutions that others overlooked, often because he had learned to survive by thinking quickly and creatively on the streets. The woman was impressed. "You have a gift," she said one day. "Not everyone sees the world the way you do. Don't ever forget that." Despite the rapid changes, the boy still faced challenges. He missed the simplicity of life on the streets in some ways, the freedom to roam and the small victories of survival. But he also knew that this new life offered something far greater: stability, education, and the chance to build a future. At times, he struggled with self-doubt. He wondered if he truly belonged in this world of opportunities, wealth, and influence. But every time he felt uncertain, he remembered the moment when he had saved the woman, and how she had looked at him with trust and gratitude. That memory reminded him that courage and kindness mattered more than status or past hardships. The boy also began to think about his family. He didn't know much about his parents or where they had gone. He had grown up with fragments of memories, stories whispered in the shadows of his early childhood. Now, as he built a new life, he wondered if he might someday find answers. The woman encouraged him to search gently, assuring him that the past could be explored safely when he was ready. As the months passed, the boy's confidence grew. He spoke more freely in groups, shared ideas during planning sessions, and even helped mentor other children in the programs. He began to understand that courage was not just about heroic acts. It was about taking responsibility, facing challenges, and helping others, even when it was difficult. One day, the woman invited him to a meeting with several of her colleagues. They were planning a major charitable initiative to provide education and resources for children in need across the city. The boy listened carefully, absorbing every detail. When the discussion turned to outreach strategies, he spoke up with ideas that no one had considered. "We should visit the streets," he said. "Talk to the children there, ask them what they need. We won't know unless we listen to them." The room went quiet for a moment. Then one of the executives smiled. "That's an excellent point," she said. "And it comes from someone who knows the streets better than any of us ever could." The woman looked at him proudly. She knew that the boy's experiences, once seen as hardships, were now a source of insight and empathy that could shape real change. For the first time, he realized that his past, with all its struggles, was not a weakness. It was a strength. As the initiative moved forward, the boy worked tirelessly alongside the woman and her team. They visited neighborhoods, spoke with families, and identified the most urgent needs. He connected with children who reminded him of himself, who were hungry for help, for understanding, and for someone to believe in them. Each success, each smile, reinforced his belief that kindness and courage could transform lives. The boy also began to explore his personal interests. He discovered a love for books and storytelling, often spending hours reading about different cultures, histories, and adventures. He learned about science and technology, amazed at how knowledge could create solutions for real-world problems. The woman encouraged him to pursue these interests, helping him find mentors and resources. Slowly, he began to dream about a future he had never imagined, a future where he could help countless people and achieve goals beyond survival. But growth was not always easy. The boy faced setbacks, moments of doubt, and challenges that tested his patience and resilience. Some days he struggled with complex lessons or felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities he had taken on. Yet each time the woman reminded him gently, "Mistakes are not failures. They are lessons. Courage is trying again even when it's hard." Through these lessons, the boy began to understand that life was not simply about what happened to you, it was about how you responded. He realized that every act of kindness, every decision to help or persevere, created a ripple effect far greater than he could imagine. The moment he had saved the woman's life was just the beginning. It had opened doors, shaped relationships, and taught him the power of empathy and action. The bond between the boy and the woman deepened. They were no longer just savior and saved, mentor and student. They were partners in creating positive change. Together, they laughed, shared stories, and celebrated small victories. The boy began to see that wealth and privilege were not the most important things in life. What mattered most was courage, empathy, and the willingness to act, even when it seemed difficult. One evening, as they walked through the city after a long day of work, the boy looked up at the glowing lights of the skyscrapers and realized something profound. The city that had once seemed cold, indifferent, and dangerous now felt full of possibility. He had survived its streets, faced its challenges, and now, with the woman's guidance, he was learning to thrive within it. He also understood that his journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more lessons to learn, and more opportunities to make a difference. But for the first time, he felt ready. He had courage, knowledge, and a heart willing to help others. He had found a purpose beyond survival, a purpose that could change not only his life but the lives of countless others. As the night fell and the city lights shimmered like stars on the ground, the boy felt a quiet sense of pride and hope. He had gone from the streets, alone and unseen, to a world filled with opportunity and support. And he knew, deep inside, that his journey had only just begun. The act of saving a single life had set in motion a story of transformation, growth, and hope that would continue to unfold in ways he could never have imagined. The boy smiled to himself, thinking of the woman who had believed in him, the children he had helped, and the lessons he had learned. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging, purpose, and possibility. The world was no longer just a place to survive. It was a place where he could make a difference, inspire others, and create a future full of hope and courage. And as he looked toward the horizon, he knew that one day he would not just remember the streets he came from. He would honor them by using everything he had learned to help others find their own path, just as someone had helped him. As the years passed, the boy, now a young man, had transformed from a street child into someone with confidence, knowledge, and purpose. The streets that once defined his life were still a part of him. They had shaped his courage, resilience, and heart. But now, he had the guidance, education, and support to use those lessons to make a difference in ways he had never imagined. The woman who had once been his patient and then his mentor remained a constant presence in his life. Their bond had grown stronger with time, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Together, they had worked on countless charitable projects, visited neighborhoods, helped children, and seen firsthand how kindness could transform lives. But now, their efforts were about to take on a larger scale. One morning, the woman invited the young man to her office. The room was bright and filled with books, documents, and plans for new initiatives. She looked at him with pride. "It's time," she said. "You're ready to lead a project of your own. Not just to help people temporarily, but to create something lasting, a program that can reach children like you were, all over the city." The young man felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Leading a project of this scale was a responsibility he had never imagined. But he remembered the courage that had guided him when he helped the woman years ago, and he knew he could face this challenge. He agreed, determined to make a meaningful difference. He spent weeks planning. He visited neighborhoods, spoke to families, and listened to children who had no voice. He wanted to understand their needs, dreams, and struggles. Every story he heard reminded him of his own past, the hunger, the fear, the loneliness. He knew that simply giving resources wasn't enough. Children needed hope, guidance, and inspiration, just as he had once needed. Finally, the project launched. It was a program designed to provide education, mentorship, and opportunities to children living in difficult circumstances. Schools, libraries, workshops, and community centers became places where children could learn, explore, and dream. The young man worked tirelessly, organizing events, coordinating volunteers, and visiting the neighborhoods himself. He knew that his presence mattered, that the children would see someone who had walked in their shoes and had now created a path forward. Word of the program spread quickly. Families were grateful, children were excited, and volunteers were inspired by the young man's story. He shared his journey openly, talking about the struggles he had faced, the courage it had taken to help someone in need, and the mentorship that had changed his life. People listened, and many were motivated to contribute, either by volunteering, donating, or simply spreading kindness in their own communities. Despite the program's growing success, the young man remained humble. He never forgot where he had come from. He continued to visit the streets occasionally, not for nostalgia, but to stay connected to the world that had once defined him. He understood that empathy came from experience, and he wanted to ensure that every decision he made in the program reflected the real needs of children facing hardship. The woman watched him with pride. She had helped him, but she had also learned from him. His courage, compassion, and determination reminded her of the impact a single act of bravery could have, not just on one life, but on countless others. Together, they became a powerful team, combining her resources and influence with his insight, empathy, and leadership. One day, during a visit to a community center, the young man met a boy who reminded him of himself at that age. The boy was quiet, wary of strangers, and clearly struggling with life on the streets. The young man knelt beside him, speaking softly. "I know what it's like to feel alone and scared," he said. "But things can change. There are people who care, and there are opportunities if you're willing to take them." The boy looked up at him, eyes wide, and slowly began to trust him. That small moment, that simple connection, reminded the young man of the first time he had helped the woman who would change his life. It was a circle of courage and kindness, repeating itself across generations. As the program expanded, it caught the attention of the media. Newspapers, television programs, and social media began sharing his story. The story of a young boy who had once been homeless, who had saved a woman's life without knowing her identity, and who had gone on to change the lives of countless children. The story inspired millions, showing that courage and kindness could ripple through society in ways no one could predict. Despite the growing recognition, the young man remained focused on the work. Fame and attention were never his goal. His purpose was to create opportunities for children, to show them that their circumstances did not define their potential. He wanted every child to know that even in the darkest moments, hope, courage, and kindness could light the way. Years later, he stood on a stage at a large event celebrating the success of the program. Hundreds of children, families, volunteers, and supporters filled the hall. He looked out at the audience, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The woman stood beside him, smiling proudly. Together, they had turned a single act of bravery into a movement that was changing lives. He spoke to the audience with honesty and passion. He shared his story, the struggles he had faced, and the courage that had guided him. He emphasized the importance of kindness, empathy, and action. One act of courage can change a life, he said. One act of kindness can create ripples that reach far beyond what we can see. Never underestimate the power of doing what is right, even when it seems small. The audience listened in silence, moved by his words. Many were inspired to volunteer, donate, or start their own initiatives. Children in the audience looked at him with hope, realizing that someone like them could overcome obstacles and achieve great things. The young man's journey had come full circle. From the streets where he had struggled to survive, to the hospital where he had saved a life, to the classrooms, neighborhoods, and stages where he now inspired others. Every step had been a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of human connection. Even as he achieved success, he never forgot the lessons of his past. He continued to mentor children, visit neighborhoods, and ensure that the program remained true to its mission. He knew that every child he helped was a reminder of his own journey and a testament to the idea that no matter where you come from, you can make a difference. The woman, who had once been a stranger in need, had become a guiding force in his life. But she often said that he had taught her just as much as she had taught him. She had learned that courage and character were not defined by wealth or status, but by actions, heart, and empathy. Together, they had created a legacy that would continue for generations, proving that kindness, courage, and opportunity could change the world. One quiet evening after a long day of work, the young man walked through the city streets, reflecting on his journey. He passed familiar corners and alleys, remembering the nights he had spent alone, the hunger, the fear, and the uncertainty. He smiled to himself, realizing how far he had come. The streets had shaped him, but they no longer defined him. He knew that life would continue to have challenges, but he also knew that courage, empathy, and determination could overcome almost anything. The memory of saving the woman's life was always with him, a reminder that a single act of bravery could start a journey that changed countless lives. And as he looked up at the city lights shimmering in the distance, he felt a deep sense of hope. His story, once a tale of struggle and survival, had become a story of transformation, opportunity, and the extraordinary power of human kindness. He had turned his life around, not just for himself, but for others, creating a legacy that would inspire people for years to come. The young man understood one simple truth. Life was not just about what happened to you, but about what you choose to do with every moment. Courage, empathy, and kindness were gifts that could ripple through the world in ways no one could predict. And with those gifts, he had learned to change not just his life, but the lives of countless others, leaving behind a story that would never be forgotten.